Well, I think there's several things. Number one, I am extremely proud that you have chosen to do this. Uh, the more I have an opportunity to speak with groups of young people, whether they're at college or I realize how little people know. And I think it's really, really important for people to know from whence they cometh. Number one, history repeats itself, and I think we're seeing vestiges of that now. And there's another saying, you won't know where you're going unless you know where you have been. So the fact that you are doing this and have felt that the experiences that we've had are worth sharing is something that I personally really appreciate. I often tell people it's taken me a long time to begin to talk about our lives because our mother, again, was very adamant about the fact that you don't talk about yourself. Talking about yourself is vain, it's unbecoming, and it's not something that you do. So whenever I can see her now standing there looking at me, but I guess I've been convinced that, and more than one person has said this, that you're not talking about yourself. You are sharing things that people need to know about. So I guess with that, I feel a little better about that. But again, I guess I feel that if Mother were around, she might punish me because I'm talking about our personal. But again, it is something that I think people, especially young people, need to know. The other thing that I think is important, and I guess is one of my personal goals, I really want people, young and some not so young, to know that what you read in history is not just about names and dates to remember for a test. These are things that happened to real people, had impact on real families. And if nothing else, they need to know this so that it won't happen again. Because we're in a situation now where I think we need to be very cognizant of things that happen, why they happen, and what can be done to prevent them from happening again.
Is there anything else that you would like to share or talk about as we get to the point of closing?
Well, you were asking about my family, and I probably have mentioned this. One of the things that I'm, I guess, proud of, but also I think was pretty important. I can remember my mother working on her master's. Now, I preface that by reminding that during that time in the 50s and before, black teachers were not allowed to matriculate at Southern universities. And school systems would pay for them to go away for 6 weeks in the summer to northern universities. My mother's friends received masters from University of Minnesota, University of Iowa, New York University, because the universities at home would not accept them. But in the late 40s, I guess it was, the University of Arkansas began offering courses on Saturday in trailers in an area that is now occupied by the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. So my mother began taking these courses because she couldn't go away for 6 weeks in the summer because we were young. And of course my father was working and it wouldn't work. So she began taking these courses, and in 1951, she completed her work, and I was standing with her the day that the postman rang the bell and gave her this box. It was from the University of Arkansas. When she opened it, there was her diploma, and I guess her hood, and a letter that congratulated her for earning her degree, but stating that this is not the time for you to come to the campus to participate in commencement. And I remember my mother read the letter, and then she handed it to me. I read it. When I gave it back to her, she crumpled it, threw it in the trash can, and walked away. She never said a word, but I knew that she was hurt. She probably talked with my aunt about it, but again, in those days, adults didn't discuss adult things with children. But I never forgot that. So in 2011, I remember it was January the 4th, I was in my office. I was working with the National Board then. And for some reason, I went online, pulled up University of Arkansas, read the Chancellor's bio. And I read it. He seemed like a formidable person. So I sat down, wrote an email to him. And I told him, I introduced myself. I told him about my brother. And I told him what happened to my mother. And I said, it is our wish that one day one of us could receive her diploma in the manner that was denied her. And when I hit send, I said, oh boy. I realized the University of Arkansas was playing in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans that day. And I said, nobody's going to ever read this email. I might as well just forget it. 2 days later, I received a response from the Chancellor. And he said he was so sorry about what happened. The university has changed, and he wants to do something to make it right. So we began to communicate. And I guess it was later that month in January, he asked if Ernest and I could participate in a conference call with he and his vice president for diversity. So we did. And at that time, he said, I have an offer I'd like to make to you. I'd like you to be our guest at commencement in May and receive your mother's diploma. So that May, my son and I went to the university, and when we checked into the hotel on the campus, first thing somebody said, oh, you're the family that's going to receive the... And everybody evidently on campus knew about this. And the next day was, in the meantime, I mentioned this. I was at the beauty salon where I go, and I was talking with one of the customers whose daughter had just moved to Arkansas. And I was telling her, I said, well, I'll be going to Arkansas in a couple of weeks. And I told her why. She said, oh, I've got to tell my daughter about that. I didn't know that her daughter was a writer for AARP. So her daughter called me the next day and said she told her editor about this story. And her editor said, we want that story. So they sent 2 videographers to University of Arkansas who were there when I arrived. And this became really blown out of proportion, but it was a wonderful experience. That morning of graduation, we were guests at the reception prior to the graduation. We were escorted into the, it wasn't a hall, the arena, because there were 4,000 graduates and there were 20,000 people in attendance. And our seats were marked Family of Lothair S. Green. And my son and I sat there, and we were told that the marshals would come to get us when it came time for us to come to the stage. The Chancellor made the most beautiful, beautiful speech about why my mother didn't receive her degree simply because of her color. And what I didn't know while he was doing this, her picture was on the Jumbotron. I'm glad I didn't see it. Was on the Jumbotron. And after he made his speech, he gave me her diploma. But prior to that, the day before, when we arrived on campus, we went to his office. He not only had copies of her diploma made for each of us, 3, but he also had researched her record and had her transcript. First time I'd ever seen it. And she had made all A's and 1 B in the 3 years that she had pursued her master's. So it was just an extraordinary experience. In fact, after graduation, we were in the lounge, and the lounge person had gotten to know me. And the lounge was crowded with parents and graduates and whatnot. And I mentioned to one of the waiters, I said, I think there's going to be a news piece coming on at 5 o'clock. So they cut whatever they were looking at off. And sure enough, at 5 o'clock, this interview that I'd done with the television station came on, and people turned around and they said, "That's you, isn't it?" But no, it was one of the local television stations interviewed me after the graduation. In fact, he asked me, "What do you think your mother would say about this?" I said, "I know exactly what she would say. She would say, Treopia, you know you should not have done this." But but I did say to him, you know, things happen. What happened to her was unfortunately a sign of the times. But I give people credit when they try to correct situations. And to me, that's what it's all about. Recognizing that what was done was not the right thing, but to try to do something, as the chancellor said, to make it right. And that's what they did.